Hey everybody, welcome back to Gideon Stuff. Today we're taking a look at the first of the many knives that Old Tonto Guy sent to the channel in his most recent package. So, big shout out to Old Tonto Guy for sending this knife to the channel. This is the Vosteed Thunderbird. Very interesting knife. This is a knife that I think is quite popular. A lot of people seem to enjoy this thing quite a bit. So let's go ahead and jump into this review. Sharpened edge, we are coming in here at about 3¼ inches. If we measure all the way back to the scales, 3½ inches almost on the dot. So definitely a full-sized folding knife. Let's bring out our size comparisons. Starting off as always with our rats. There is the rat 1, and actually we might zoom this thing out a little bit. You know what, we'll do like that. Yeah, I think that'll work. And there's our rat 2. Very similar in overall length to the rat 1. But this knife is interesting because we've got kind of a broadish blade, but it's also a very narrow knife. Definitely a striking profile, to be sure. Let's bring out our USA made comparisons. There's the Spyderco PM2. And here's the Benchmade bug out. Actually, this knife, now that I look at it, is kind of like the PM2 and the bug out had a child. I don't know, let me know if you get that same vibe. And let's bring out our Civivis, our budget comparisons. Here is the Praxis, and here is the Elementum. Coolio, coolio, coolio. And we're going to go ahead and close off size comparisons by comparing it against a couple of other Vosteeds. Here is the Vosteed Grind, also loaned in from Old Tonto Guy. And here is the Vosteed Nightshade, which up till now is the only Vosteed I have reviewed. So there we go. I'm a huge fan of the Grind and the Nightshade. A little less of a fan of this knife, but we'll get into that. So for our materials here, we have a dual ground drop point blade of S35 VN. We've got Damascus scales, wire clip, aluminum backspacer, and it is a button lock running on bearings with basically every deployment method you can think of. Let's go ahead and go cut some stuff. Hey guys, you ready to talk about a knife? The answer better be a resounding yes, because otherwise, why the heck are you still watching? Today we're talking about the Vosteed Thunderbird. Let's go ahead and hop right in by talking about probably the most well-known aspect of this knife, probably the thing that gave it its rise to fame, the action. So this thing is using the Trek lock, which is basically an internally mounted button lock. And yeah, this thing is ridiculously smooth, you know, free floating, and you have all the deployment methods. You've got this blade hole, you can thumb flick, reverse flick, got a back flipper, got a front flipper, you've got that button, and you do have a fuller that does work. Now, this knife is incredibly fidgety. It is. This thing is very fun to play with. It is very free-floating in its actionomics. That's a new word. But I gotta say, I don't like the way the action feels all that much. Again, everything works like it's supposed to, but the whole thing feels kind of mushy. It's super easy to fail like basically any of these deployment methods because there's not really a detent. And really what makes them work is you just got to give them a little bit of oomph, right? I don't know, I get why people enjoy it. And yeah, it is very fidgety. This is a great knife to sit on the couch and watch TV with. But to me, it's not the most satisfying thing ever. Again, it's more fun than satisfying. As you can see here, though, like I'm not even really paying attention to what I'm doing, and it is definitely very easy to manipulate and move and all that good stuff. So the action is fine. The action's fine. Some people obviously enjoy it way more than I do. I think I've just realized that I'm not a fan of knives that have all the deployment methods. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about the ergos. I hate the ergos on this thing. I do not like them whatsoever. I do not like them, Sam I am. So we do have a fairly neutral handle. Very narrow. When you grip the knife back here, for me, I do feel the clip. You can see here the clip is mounted right at the top right here, so you do feel this corner quite a bit. You're also a really long ways away from the edge. I mean, we've got like an inch plus from my knuckle to where the edge starts. And then if you choke up here, it doesn't really feel that much better. Like, I don't feel like I have that much control over this edge. We've got this big choil here and whatever, but I don't like having my thumb here. And the knife is balanced terribly. Absolutely terribly. Let's get this. Come on there. Right there. The knife balance is right there. That's awful. That is awful. I do not like that at all. And it leaves the knife feeling kind of awkward in hand. Plus, I normally love where you have a thumb wrap on the blade. But this one, the jimping needed to come all the way up in, because when I'm back here, or if I'm like kind of trying to get my thumb in there, it's just kind of smooth. It doesn't really lock me in. I just don't really like the ergos on this knife. They're very slim. Also, when I'm choked up in here, I feel the hard edges of this G10 a little bit more. This is probably the better grip, I suppose, but I don't like it all that much, to be completely honest. All right, let's talk about the carry. So we do have a reversible clip. Awesome, they're looking out for the lefties. I love to see that. It's a wire clip, and this is one of my least favorite wire clips. It feels very, very weak. You can see here that it's, we'll probably show this better at the table, but it's, this side is not sitting on the scales anymore because of these little grooves in the handle. But the knife itself is very, very lightweight. It's very, very slim. And honestly, this is one of the things that the knife does better than most, in my opinion, is you have a lot of knife for not a whole lot of weight. Like, this is a full-size knife, but it folds into a very compact package and it disappears in the pocket. I mean, it tucks away really, really nicely and it's not obtrusive at all. So I think that's actually pretty awesome. Okay, let's go ahead and do some cutting. So we have a S35 VN blade here with a dual grind. We've got, it's a drop point, but we've got a flat grind up here. We've got a, actually I think this is a flat grind too, but there is a difference. We've got two different grinding approaches on there. So let's go ahead and do some cutting, shall we? Whoops. And see right there that just, you lose control of the dang thing. I do not find this to be the greatest slicer out there. It'll cut, but it's not an incredible slicer. It's nothing really to write home about. All right, let's go ahead and do our rope pull. Gosh dang. There we go. Tilt down here. Let's go ahead and crunch our way through this. 1, 2, 3. All right, it didn't do terribly on that. That was all right, probably because we have that kind of reinforced upper portion of the blade right there. So, yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. I'm not going to complain about that a whole lot. All right, let's get our pull noodle out here. Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh, look. Okay, did you guys see what happened right there? So this thing is sharp. This knife is sharp. But this transition between this part of the blade and this part of the blade, when we were coming through the pull noodle, it bound up and just started tearing out. So, I don't like seeing that. Okay, we can't go that thin. Oh my gosh, yeah, this thing is just ripping when we get to that second edge. Look at that. That is no bueno. And you know what? I gotta go grab a piece of paper just to show you guys that this thing does have a sharp apex. All right, here's some receipt paper. Excuse me. That little tip right there might actually be a little bit dull. There are some rough spots in that edge, but it's not like... Actually, this little part up here is the sharpest part. Okay, well, maybe it's not super sharp right now, but honestly, that cutting performance that we're getting right there is what I've noticed the whole time I've been carrying this. It's just not the best cutter out there. So, yeah, there we go. See you guys back at the table. And yes, if there's one thing that can be said for the Vosteed Thunderbird, it is a pretty amazing fidget toy. You can sit here and play with it all day, anyway. It's a lot of fun. And you know, it's not a bad way to spend an afternoon. Relaxing by the river, playing with a knife. There's a lot of things that you could do with your time that are a lot worse off. Alrighty guys, so it's review cutting part 2. The Thunderbird did not perform the best at our review cutting. However, the edge was a little bit rough. Old Tom's guy's been using this knife before he sent it to me. I've used this knife a lot before the review cutting happened, so you know, the edge was maybe a little bit rough. And even though I have noticed that this is not the greatest cutter through the use I've been putting it through, I want to make sure I give every knife I review a fair shake. So I threw an edge on this guy real quick using my field sharpener, and we're going to do a pool noodle cut again, just to make sure. Now I did try to leave our secondary tip there. You can see that we still kept this knife as a tanto. Let's go ahead and show that now we are dealing with a sharp knife. Let's go ahead and do our pool noodle cut. We bite in very nicely, that's good. But look, we're still binding up and we're still tearing. But that did feel a lot nicer. Let's see if we can go a little bit thinner. Okay. We're still tearing. You can see right there, we are still not really cutting cleanly. This little transition area here is really kind of a pain. But, I mean, those cuts are significantly nicer than the ones that we previously did. However, still not that great. And if I just do this at regular speed without, like, trying to be as careful as possible, it just... I've really got to be deliberate. Yeah, that's just... You know, watch a bunch more of my reviews. See what pool noodle cutting normally looks like, because that's not real great. So I think we did better this round, but still not amazing. Alright, let's go ahead and talk about what I'm liking and not liking about the Vosteed Thunderbird. And let's start off with my positives. Number one, I think that's a cool name, the Thunderbird. That's awesome. A little piece of Native American mythology, some good old American folklore. I like stuff like that, so awesome. Next thing, I do think this is a very cool looking knife. This is a very striking knife, and I dig it. I really do dig it quite a bit. You can see here the light playing off all the different grinds on the blade. There's a lot going on this blade. We've got a swedge up here, we've got a fuller, we've got this blade hole, we've got a dual grind, we've got satin finishes that are kind of going different directions. Just an awesome, awesome blade. And I do like this G-Mascus handle. I think you can also get this in a blue G-Mascus. And I've always been a fan of this material. I don't have a whole lot of knives in my collection of this material, but I enjoy it quite a bit. Next thing, this knife is very, very usable. For righties and lefties alike. You have all the deployment methods imaginable, and they are accessible from the right or the left, which is really, really great. And you have a reversible pocket clip. So lefties have been considered in this. Button locks are obviously very, very friendly for lefties to use. So I like that a whole lot. Always a good thing to see a company paying attention to the lefties in the crowd. Next thing, minimal hardware. We have 1, 2, 3 screws, period, and this is the pocket clip screw. That's awesome. I like to see minimalism like that. And I do like the materials here. S35EN, the G Mascus. This thing, those are good materials for the price of this knife. And I really, really appreciate that. And the last thing we're going to talk about as a positive is the fidget factor. This thing is incredibly, incredibly addictive to play with. This is a knife that you can sit and flick on your couch till the cows come home. This thing is absolutely, absolutely phenomenal. Yeah, they've given you every opening method conceivable, as I've already said multiple times. And yeah, if you're someone who likes to fidget, and let's be honest, all of us like to fidget, okay? All of us like to fidget. This is a very, very fun fidget knife. I lied, one more thing that I do like. This is a full-size knife that folds into a very slim, very lightweight, basically manageable package. This is a very, very easy knife to carry because it's so slim, so lightweight, but you have a full-size blade with you. So if you're wanting to carry a larger knife, but you don't want to have to deal with the weight that normally comes with that, this could be a good option for you. All right, let's go ahead and talk about some of my negatives. The number one negative is, yes, this knife is very fidgety and fun, but I don't really like the action. It feels kind of mushy, right? There's not traditional detent. Even though it's easy for me to use all deployment methods, a lot of that, like with this flipper tab, it's because the way the flipper tab works is that it's just so much higher than the pivot that you get a bunch of leverage. The front flipper is jimped all the way over, which is awesome. This is the way every front flipper should be. So it gives you really, really good traction. And then the blade holes typically work with light detents anyways. But I just find the action to be kind of mushy. I don't know, I just, you know, I don't really like it. It's not my thing. You don't get that snappy detent. Next thing, the Trek lock, I'm not a huge fan of this. Basically, it's a button lock that the blade rotates around. So instead of the button lock being, here I've got this button lock right here. You can see here the button lock, our plunge is right there. Focus up, camera. Plunge is right there. And then, bam, engage with the tang of the blade. In this case, the button lock is encased in the blade tang. And this leads to less than ideal lockup strength. What do I have later? You know what? Here. We'll use this as my little spine whacker today. Fold up. Yeah, not the most solid lockup ever. And in fact, the lockup is so weak that I could definitely see you accidentally disengaging this knife while in use. So I'm not a big fan of that. It's not something that I like to see. Next up, I do not like the ergos on this knife. Back here, I mean, it's comfortable enough in hand, but I am so far away from that edge. I am so far away. I mean, let's actually measure how far away from the edge I am. Yeah, about 1.25 inches. That's a long ways away. And then choking up here, this just feels so ridiculous and wonky. And this is not the kind of blade that I really want to, like, this is a very powerful grip, but I don't feel like this is the most effective way to use this narrow blade. Also, the balance on this thing we talked about is pretty atrocious. I'm not the biggest fan of where this knife balances right there. That is not where you want your knife to balance. Yeah, I just don't like the ergos all that much, which, yeah, it's kind of a shame. Next thing, oh, actually, something with the ergos. I wish that this jimping went all the way up this thumb ramp. I think that would have been just the smart thing to do because you want to rest your thumb there. And again, this is probably the better grip for this knife because, I don't know, this feels better with the blade, but I do feel like I lose a lot of control because of that balance and because I'm so far away from the edge. Speaking of that blade, this blade is not really amazing. So yeah, we've got this dual grind here, which is kind of cool, it's interesting. But the blade itself is not super thin behind the edge, it's a very narrow blade. I just found it to be unwieldy and not the best cutter, at least not, it didn't cut the way that I would want a knife like this to cut. So yeah, that's what a knife is for. A knife is a cutting tool. It's supposed to cut, and this knife does not cut very well, and I'm not a fan of that. I don't dig that. And the last thing that I'm going to complain about, I know this has been a really complainy review, is this clip. This clip feels just kind of janky. Now, wire clips are not the most solid feeling clips, but I typically like wire clips. I think they're most of the time pretty good. This one rattles around a lot, and what we can see here, let's focus up, see if we can get this angle just right. There we go. We can see that it only touches down on the scale with one side, and it's set on these lines here, these little grooves, which I think helps to displace it, and just, I don't know, just not the best clip ever. Okay, with all that out of the way, let's go on to my final conclusions. Final conclusions, I do not like this knife at all. I remember when this knife was released and everyone was going gaga over it. Everyone was super excited about this knife. I was super excited. Man, I wanted this knife so bad. And I'm really glad that I've got to handle old Tonto guys. I'm glad I've got to handle a loaner before I bought my own, because I don't like this knife one bit. It's a very cool looking knife. It's a great idea. But what this knife has kind of taught me is I'm okay with only one or two opening mechanisms. I don't need every opening mechanism thrown on a knife. It's unwieldy, and I just don't care for it that much, especially with the button lock. I feel like most of these deployment methods, or all these deployment methods, function less well because they're all on the same knife. Yeah, I can see why people really enjoy this knife. Again, it's a good-looking knife. Some people might really enjoy that fidget factor. But for me personally, it doesn't really work as a knife. It's a good-looking knife. I like this pop of like bronze, copper on the backspacer. I like the G-Mascus. I think the blade looks good. But at the end of the day, this just doesn't do what I want my EDC knife to do, and that's work as a good knife. So for that reason, I can't recommend this knife. I cannot recommend this knife. I do not think this is a knife that you guys should buy. The lock failure, the subpar performance from the blade, the awkward ergos, I feel like there are much better knives out there for you to spend your money on. So yeah, go ahead and pass this one up. It's a shame to say, I was really looking forward to this knife, but yeah, gotta be honest, don't really like it. However, I still have high hopes for Vosteed, because this knife that old Tonto guy sent is one of the greatest knives I've carried all year, and I have carried the snot out of it. I love this knife. I love the Nightshade. This is the second Vosteed we've reviewed, and unfortunately it's a bummer, but the next Vosteed we review is going to be a winner, I can tell you that much. Alrighty, that's going to be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Big shout out to my channel members, especially old Tonto guy. Again, he sent this knife into the channel. I really appreciate that. He's a huge support. Yeah, if you enjoyed this video, leave a like, comment below, and subscribe. I've been Gideon, and I'll see you in the next one. Adios.